spending an extra day, and hopefully this is going to help you with the last two on your test review anyway. Test is tomorrow, and here's what I'm worried about. Let's say I take 22 as an example, and then I don't want to do your test review problems, if at all possible. They're on video, plus you need to be trying them yourself. You have a function f of x equal x plus 5, and they actually give you this other function over here, but on the test you don't get given the function. They say show whether or not these two are inverses of each other. So what I'm going to do is just change the question a little bit. I'm going to say let's find the inverse. Let's find the inverse of f of x. Okay. And so one thing you need to know is when I write the inverse of f of x, I could call it g of x, but that's not usually what people call it. They usually call it f inverse of x. And this is a minus 1 here. That's how they show that f of x and f inverse x, that these two functions are inverses of each other. So that's one thing. What the book had done, it had us show that f of g of x was x. Okay, and again, those weren't assigned, but I was trying to go over them, and that's when I kind of got a little frustrated because I felt like some of you were blowing me off. And you can't afford to do that because you're going to need to know this next year. All right, remember that if I want to write the inverse, this is what you have to do on the test. First, if you remember that we just call f of x y because, it just makes it easier to mess with what we're going to do. And there were just two simple steps here. One of them was switch the x and the y. Okay, so if I switch that, that's going to be x equal y plus 5. What did I do next? Do y'all remember? Really only two steps to this. What was the second step? Yeah, solve for y, okay, or isolate y, solve for y, get y by itself. So if you circle the y, that's pretty easy to do here. All you got to do is subtract 5 from each other, and you get y equal x minus 5. Now, I'm going to write it like this. Usually when you get to Algebra 2 and up, we like working with y equal x minus 5. It's handy when we're putting it in our calculator, when we're thinking and everything. But usually if you've got more than one function, you need to be able to tell them apart. So that's why they might call one f of x and the other g of x. By the way, let's compare these two functions. Is this function right here what the book said I was supposed to check to see if it was an inverse? It was 1 over x plus 5. That is not it, is it? So the answer to 22, if you did it the way the book assigned it, would be no, they're not. But here's how we could actually find out what the real inverse is. And instead of calling this g of x on the test, and what gets me, this is the book test, but the book doesn't, they use this notation on the test, and yet they haven't even introduced you to it in the book where I can see it, where you would use it in the problems. Every once in a while you'll see it used in the problem set, but they don't really emphasize it. You would write this f inverse of x is equal to x minus 5. That doesn't mean it's to the minus 1 power. It just is a way of showing that f and this other function, f minus 1x, which is inverse, that's a 1 there. It's just hard to get it to show up. It's just now I know I've labeled them to say these two are inverses of each other. Okay, so on the test, what they're going to have you do is, well, they don't actually ask you to graph this one on the test, and you can see on the review a similar problem. It's just a little harder than this one. They don't actually ask you to graph it, but here's what they do. They start playing around with it. They say, well, what is f inverse of 35? Where am I going to plug 35 into? The f of x equation or the f inverse equation? What notation did they use out here? They want that equation. That's this one right here, isn't it? That's not hard to plug in, is it? Remember this notation, when they have a function and they put a parentheses, it means this is the x I'm going to plug in. So I'm going to go get that function. The f inverse function is just x minus 5, and they're telling me wherever I see an x, put that number in parentheses. So the answer in this one would be 35 minus 5 is 30, okay? So when they tell you this notation on the test, they're telling you go to the inverse function and plug in 35 for x. Okay? Turn this on. What if they ask you, because this is what they do on the test, they say what is f of 11? Where am I going to plug 11? Which function am I going to pick? This one? Or am I going to pick this one? Which one? First. Well, did they put the -1 on the F? No, so they're telling you to go back up to the one they labeled f of x. We found f inverse of x, and this is what this one means. This one means this one is the inverse function. So f of 11 means go up there and get that original function, x plus 5. So I'm going to write x plus 5, but remember what you can do is wherever you see the variable, leave a parentheses, and that way, you know, you can just go, well, what do they want me to put in for x? They want me to put in 11. So 11 plus 5 is 66, right? 16. My brain is like thinking 2 steps ahead right now, and I need to pay attention to where I am. Okay, so now I'm going to go to a new slide here, but I'm going to use these same 2 functions. We had, is equal to x plus 5, right? I can't see once I go on, so y'all have to tell me.
What problem is this? X minus 5.
Thank you. X minus 5 is the one we've been working. It's the same one. It was 22, I had told you, but we're just using it as an example. What if they wanted me to show that f of f inverse of x is equal to x? Did we do that the other day, do you think?
Mm-hmm.
We did. What did it look like when we did it? Yeah, we had called it g of x because they had actually, just in some of their labeling, had on 21 through 25, we actually worked through some of those, but they were like, they called it g of x in those instructions. And so if you had worked that and then all of a sudden you show up on the test and you see this, you're thinking, what, you know? So they were just calling this g of x, but most of the time we label it the way that it's labeled here. And then on the test they go back to that labeling and pretend like, oh, why don't you know what's going on, right? So what this means is, remember that if I want to show that 2 functions are inverses of each other, I really have to show that f of f inverse of x is equal to x. And really, I'm all supposed to show it the other way, though this book does not emphasize that. You really are supposed to prove it, show it both ways. So I'm going to do that one on this, just so you can see what that looks like, okay? Because the book only really has you do it the first way. They only worry about one way, but technically, even in books that are not as rigorous as this, they make you do it both ways. So I'm not sure why he doesn't here. So let's do f of f inverse of x first. Now, if you remember where we started when we did these functions, I think I put too many parentheses. Oh, yeah, I got too many parentheses. Let me get rid of that last one. All right, so remember what you do is you go to this outside function. What's the function? F of x. Just to cover up the whole parentheses part in your mind for just a minute. F of x was up here. It was x plus 5, right? But they don't want me to put x in there. They are telling me by what's in parentheses that I should put something in there other than x. What are they telling me to plug in for x? Yeah, x minus 5. They want the whole inverse function. This f minus 1x is here. They're telling me to plug in x minus 5. So this looks worse than it is, because what is x minus 5 plus 5? Ah, you just showed that f of f inverse of x is x. You just showed that first little thing that I've got that red check mark by. You just showed that it equals x. That's all it does, is you're just showing if I put the functions together, they undo each other and give me back x. If I plug in x, I get x back. And in the original function, it was an x that was sitting there. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make you do it, even though the book doesn't have you doing it. I'm going to say, let's do f inverse of f of x. This is pretty easy math here. They want me to write down f inverse of x. Well, it is x minus 5, but they don't want me to put x there. What do they want me to put there? The whole f of x function, which was x plus 5, yeah. Now, is this really hard? No, because what is x plus 5 minus 5?
X.
Just x, okay? So you see, you just showed the second part now. You just showed that if I did the inverse and plugged in the function, then I'm going to get x out. We proved that these two things undo each other because when they both start out, they have an x in there, but you're putting the whole inverse function in for your x, and you're showing that it both of them turn out to equal x. This proves that these two are inverses of each other. It's really a proof for these functions.